It's the middle of winter. We're going to cook something absolutely heartwarming and really delicious. It's going to be a gorgeous, really tasty beef Wellington. Back inside now, we're going to cook up this gorgeous dish. And the first thing that you need is a beef fillet. Go out to your butcher, make sure you get a good quality one. You want a nice chunky one because we're going to roast it in the oven and we don't want to overcook it. There's only a little bit of trimming to do, which is this sort of sinew on the outside. And what I love about this dish is that you can sit down and share it as a family, just a couple of you, and sort of carve it and eat it family style, which is really cool and the best way of eating, in my opinion. So, we want to season them up nice and generous. Salt all over. And it's definitely more of a wintry sort of dish. It'll really sort of reminds me of the depths of winter. Absolutely gorgeous. Now, pan, really high heat. A little bit of grapeseed oil or olive oil. In that goes, and we're going to sear it around the outside so it's nice and golden brown. Now, as that beef's searing, we're going to make what's called a little duxelle, which we're going to sort of smear all over the beef. We're going to use button mushrooms, just removing the stalks. Two ways of doing this. You could either whack all the mushrooms into the blitzer and just sort of make a paste. But the way I prefer to do it is just getting a really fine dice. Okay, so the beef seared off, lovely golden brown all the way around the outside. We're just going to pop him onto a plate. Don't lose that pan. We're going to use that in a second to cook our mushrooms and our onions. Now you can see I've just been chopping this and the mushrooms are really nice and fine. So we can set those to one side, and we're going to do exactly the same thing with an onion, so really nice small dice. Beautiful thing about a beef Wellington is it's something that you can make in advance. Pop it into the fridge for your dinner party, for your date that's coming over, for your family, whatever it is. And just as it comes to the time before, like an hour before they come and eat, pop it into the oven. Very little work involved. Get your little side dishes ready. Right, so onion, nice fine dice. Mix it up with your mushrooms. Just give it a last little run through with your knife. As I was saying, no worries about doing this, whizzing it up in a food processor, but I just prefer the nice sort of little texture that this gives. Now I was saying earlier, hold on to that pan. The reason we're going to cook the mushrooms and the onions in here is because there's lovely, gorgeous, ridiculously nice flavour in there from the beef that we seared off. So, in they go. And we're going to cook them for a good sort of 8-9 minutes to ensure that all the moisture comes out of those mushrooms. Mushrooms are very high in water content, so we're going to just sort of sear them off and make sure that that mixture is dried out. And as soon as it has, we can start smearing it onto the beef there, and we're nearly halfway there. Right, so the mushrooms starting to dry out, as you can see. We're just going to take those off the heat, set them to one side. Now, to assemble the whole thing, I'm going to lose the chopping board. And we're going to go back to our beef and just smear a little bit of mustard all over it. What the mustard's going to do is A, it's going to give it a really nice flavour. B, it's going to help that lovely mushroom and onion duxelle to stick to the beef. So all over it goes. This really is quite literally one of my favourite dishes. Absolutely, completely and utterly gorgeous. All over it goes. And now back our mushroom duxelle just onto the plate. And we'll just let that cool down for a few seconds while we roll out our pastry. Now, puff pastry, very hard to make yourself. Unless you're a serious cook and you've got lots of time on your hands, I probably wouldn't recommend doing it. Go out to a shop, buy a frozen variety, or even better, some local bakeries or little sort of pastry shops will sell you some homemade stuff. But the stuff you get in the shops these days is perfectly good. Take it out about 10-15 minutes before you want to use it. Generous with the flour so it doesn't stick, and just start by rolling it out. It might take a while just for it to sort of thaw out and warm up. So really get your muscles into it, roll it out. Now you don't want to roll it too thin. There's nothing worse than a really sort of super thin beef Wellington. So there's the sort of about maybe 1/4 of an inch, because you want that sort of nice crispy pastry around the outside of it. Into a nice square, plenty of flour so it's not going to stick. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to start off with our duxelle, which is dried out. You don't want it really sort of watery or runny, because then it's not going to help your pastry crisp up at all. All the way into a little sort of square. Smear them out. Then our beef, just at the very back, and just sort of spread the mushrooms in so we're not wasting any. And now we're going to take the outside layer off, because we've just got enough. And now it's a case of just rolling it up like a big sort of sausage roll. Push them over like that. And then just nice and tight. You don't want too much pastry, so just sort of trim that little extra bit on the outside. And we're just going to fold them in at the bottom, crease it together, and then the edges, we're just going to fold them in as well, and underneath. And the same on this end. Just make sure it's all nice and tight at the bottom. And what you end up with is something that looks like that. Absolutely delicious. So the last thing you want to do is a little bit of egg wash, so just an egg in there, beat them up. It's going onto a tray which we're just going to sort of lightly flour so it doesn't stick. On he goes. And just egg wash, making sure to nice and liberal with it all over. And this is going to just sort of really help it to get that lovely sort of golden brown glaze on it. So into all the little nooks and crannies. Last thing we're going to do is just score them using whatever pattern you think works best. And that is him pretty much ready to go into the oven. We're going to pop him in at 180 degrees centigrade, 360 degrees Fahrenheit, until it goes lovely and golden brown. So it's been in there for about 25 minutes. You can see that it's lovely and golden brown. Now what we're going to do is we're actually going to let that rest for about another 10 minutes. There's loads of heat in there because it's totally encased in pastry. And by the time we let it rest and we go to slice it, it's going to be lovely and delicious and really, really nice and medium rare. So it's been resting there for about 5 minutes. What we're going to do now is just slice them up, and this really is literally showtime. It's going to be absolutely delicious, right? So trim off the end, that's going to be mostly pastry. And we want a nice sort of thick slice. There's nothing worse than a sort of really thin little miserable slices of beef Wellington. You really want them nice and generous. So if you look in there, it's absolutely perfectly cooked. Those lovely mushrooms are around the outside, and we're going to serve it up straight away. Look at that. It's my absolute favorite dish in the world. You've got those lovely sort of mushroom stuffing around the outside, that lovely crispy puff pastry, and the lovely medium rare beef in the center. An absolute winner, it's beef Wellington.